Picture this. Two of America's most advanced fighter jets, worth $150 million each, racing through the sky at twice the speed of sound. Their mission? Intercept an unidentified aircraft that appeared on radar screens without warning. The pilots had their fingers on triggers, ready to defend American airspace at all costs. Then something happened that changed everything. A voice crackled through their radio, soft, calm, and completely unexpected. It wasn't the voice of a terrorist or foreign agent. It wasn't even the voice of a trained pilot. It was the voice of someone who should never have been in the cockpit of any aircraft, let alone one that had just triggered the most sophisticated air defense system in the world. What happened next would challenge everything the military thought they knew about courage, determination, and the lengths one person would go to save the people they loved most. This is the true story of how a single voice stopped two F-22 Raptors in their tracks and changed the lives of everyone involved forever. Sarah Chen had never stolen anything in her life, let alone a twin-engine Cessna worth $500,000. But as she sat in the pilot's seat of the aircraft she had just taken from Riverside Municipal Airport, her hands shaking on the controls, she knew this was the only way to save her daughter's life. The morning had started like any other Tuesday in October. Sarah worked as a flight instructor at the small airport outside Los Angeles, teaching wealthy executives and weekend warriors how to navigate the skies. She loved her job, even though it barely paid enough to cover her modest apartment and her 8-year-old daughter Emma's medical bills. Emma had been diagnosed with a rare heart condition when she was 5. The doctors said she needed surgery, but their insurance company had denied the claim 3 times. The appeals process could take months, and Emma didn't have months. Her condition was getting worse every day, and the cardiologist had made it clear that without the operation, Emma might not see Christmas. Sarah had tried everything. She had sold her car, borrowed money from friends, and even started a crowdfunding campaign online. But the surgery cost $300,000, and she was nowhere close to raising that amount. The hospital had agreed to perform the operation if she could provide a $50,000 down payment, but even that seemed impossible on her instructor's salary. That morning, as Sarah prepared for her first lesson of the day, she received a phone call that changed everything. Dr. Martinez, Emma's cardiologist, was calling from the Children's Hospital. "Sarah, I need you to bring Emma in immediately," he said, his voice heavy with concern. "Her latest tests show significant deterioration. We can't wait any longer." Sarah felt the world spin around her. "But doctor, I don't have the money yet." "The insurance company said they need another 2 weeks to review." "Sarah, listen to me carefully," Dr. Martinez interrupted. "Emma doesn't have 2 weeks. Based on what I'm seeing, she might not have 2 days. I'm going to do everything I can to convince the hospital administration to proceed without the down payment, but I need you to understand how serious this situation has become." After hanging up the phone, Sarah sat in her car outside the flight school office, crying until she had no tears left. She thought about calling her ex-husband, but he had disappeared 2 years ago when Emma's medical bills started piling up. She thought about calling her parents, but they had already mortgaged their retirement home to help with previous medical expenses. As she sat there feeling hopeless, Sarah noticed one of her regular students arriving for his lesson. James Morrison was a successful real estate developer who flew his own plane for business trips. He was always bragging about his latest deals, his expensive watches, and the millions he made flipping commercial properties. "Morning, Sarah," he called out cheerfully as he walked toward his plane. "Ready for another lesson in aerial excellence?" Sarah forced a smile and followed him to his aircraft, a beautiful twin-engine Cessna Citation that he had bought brand new the previous year.
As they went through the pre-flight inspection, James continued talking about his latest business success.
"Just closed a deal yesterday for $12 million, he said proudly. "Sometimes I can't believe how easy it is to make money in this business. I mean, what's $50,000 to someone like me? I spend that much on wine in a month." Sarah's hand stopped moving as she checked the aircraft's fuel levels. $50,000, the exact amount she needed to save her daughter's life. To James, it was nothing more than pocket change. During the flight lesson, as James practiced takeoffs and landings, Sarah found herself staring at the plane's sophisticated avionics system. She had been flying for 15 years and knew these aircraft inside and out. She could probably fly this plane better than James could, even though it was his. An idea began forming in her mind, an idea so desperate and dangerous that she tried to push it away. But as they returned to the airport and James bragged about another expensive purchase, the idea grew stronger. "You know, Sarah," James said as they walked back to the office, "I'm thinking about buying a second plane, maybe something even bigger. Money really isn't an object when you know how to make it." That evening, Sarah sat by Emma's hospital bed, watching her daughter sleep. Emma looked so small and fragile, connected to various monitors that beeped softly in the darkened room. Her breathing was labored, and her lips had a slight blue tint that hadn't been there a week ago. Dr. Martinez had managed to convince the hospital to admit Emma and start some preliminary treatments, but he had been clear that the surgery needed to happen within the next 48 hours. The insurance company was still reviewing their case, which Sarah knew was just a polite way of saying they were hoping Emma would die before they had to pay. "Mummy?" Emma's weak voice broke through Sarah's thoughts. Her daughter's eyes were open, looking up at her with a trust that broke Sarah's heart. "I'm here, sweetheart," Sarah whispered, taking Emma's small hand in hers. "Are the doctors going to fix my heart?" Emma asked, her voice barely audible. Sarah felt tears welling up in her eyes. She had always promised to be honest with Emma about her condition, but how could she tell an 8-year-old that they might die because their mother couldn't afford to save them? "The doctors are going to do everything they can," Sarah said softly. "I promise you that, baby. I will do everything in my power to make sure you get better." Emma smiled weakly and closed her eyes again. "I love you, Mummy. I love you too, sweetheart, more than you'll ever know." As Sarah sat there in the quiet hospital room, listening to the rhythmic beeping of the machines keeping her daughter alive, she made a decision that would change both of their lives forever. She was going to steal James Morrison's plane. The plan formed quickly in her mind. She knew James's schedule because she was his instructor. He always flew to San Francisco on Wednesday mornings for business meetings and didn't return until Friday. The plane would be sitting in the hangar for 3 days. Plenty of time for what she needed to do. Sarah had heard stories about wealthy executives paying enormous sums to have their children treated at exclusive medical facilities. There was a private hospital in Switzerland that specialized in pediatric heart surgery, and their success rates were legendary. If she could somehow get Emma there, maybe they could save her life without requiring the bureaucratic nightmare of insurance approval. But getting to Switzerland would require crossing international borders without proper documentation. And that was where James's plane came in. The Citation had the range to make it to Europe with only one fuel stop, and its sophisticated navigation system could help her avoid most commercial air traffic routes. Sarah knew it was crazy. She knew it was illegal. She knew that if she got caught, she would go to prison and Emma would be left with no one to care for her. But as she looked at her dying daughter, she realized that doing nothing was an even worse option. The next morning, Sarah called in sick to work and spent the day researching everything she could about international flight routes, fuel stops, and airport security procedures. She found information about the Swiss medical facility and even managed to speak with one of their coordinators, who confirmed that they could perform Emma's surgery within days of arrival if they had the medical records and a substantial payment. Sarah had exactly $8,000 in her savings account, which wouldn't be nearly enough for the surgery. But she had learned that the Swiss hospital had a charity program for emergency cases, and Emma's condition would definitely qualify. The main barrier was getting there, which was why she needed the plane. That evening, as she tucked Emma into a hospital bed, Sarah made her final preparations. She had studied the Citation's manual until she had memorized every switch and procedure. She had mapped out a flight route that would take them across the Atlantic with a fuel stop in Iceland. She had even managed to obtain temporary passports through an expedited service, claiming it was for a family emergency. "Mummy, are we going on a trip?" Emma asked weakly. Dr. Martinez had agreed to discharge her for a few days, ostensibly so she could spend time at home before the surgery, but really because Sarah had begged him to give her more time to arrange financing. "Yes, sweetheart," Sarah said, smoothing Emma's hair. "We're going on a very special trip to see some doctors who are going to make you all better." "Will it hurt?" Emma asked, her big brown eyes filled with trust. "Maybe a little," Sarah admitted. "But I promise you, baby, everything I'm doing is to make sure you get well. No matter what happens, I need you to remember that Mummy loves you more than anything in the world." Early Thursday morning, while it was still dark, Sarah drove to the airport with Emma sleeping in the passenger seat. The little girl was wrapped in blankets and connected to a portable oxygen tank that Dr. Martinez had reluctantly provided after Sarah convinced him she needed it for the trip to see a specialist in another city. The airport was quiet at 5 in the morning, with only a few maintenance workers and early commuters moving about. Sarah used her instructor's key to enter the hangar where James's Citation was parked. The beautiful aircraft sat gleaming under the fluorescent lights, looking like a silver bird ready to take flight. Sarah gently woke Emma and helped her into the plane's luxurious cabin. The little girl was amazed by the leather seats and polished wood panels, temporarily forgetting about her condition as she explored her surroundings. "This is like a flying palace, Mummy," Emma whispered in wonder. Yes, it is, Sarah agreed, her heart pounding as she went through the pre-flight checklist. She had never stolen anything before, not even a candy bar from a store, but here she was preparing to steal a $500,000 aircraft to save her daughter's life. As she started the engines, Sarah tried to push away thoughts of what would happen when James discovered his plane was missing. She tried not to think about the federal charges she would face if she got caught. All that mattered now was getting Emma to Switzerland and finding doctors who could save her life. The Citation rolled out of the hangar and toward the runway as the first hints of dawn appeared on the horizon. Sarah had filed a false flight plan, claiming she was taking the aircraft to Las Vegas for maintenance, which would buy her some time before anyone realized what was really happening. As the plane lifted off into the California sky, Sarah looked back at her daughter, who was sleeping peacefully in one of the leather seats. For the first time in months, Sarah felt a sense of hope. They were finally doing something, finally taking action, instead of waiting for insurance companies and hospital administrators to decide whether Emma deserved to live. But as they climbed higher into the morning sky, Sarah had no idea that their unauthorized flight had already triggered alerts in the most sophisticated air defense system in the world. Within minutes, 2 F-22 Raptor fighter jets would be scrambling to intercept them, and Sarah's desperate act of love was about to become an international incident that would capture the attention of the entire world. Colonel Marcus Webb was enjoying his second cup of coffee at Edwards Air Force Base when the alert klaxon shattered the peaceful morning quiet. As the commanding officer of the 4012 Fighter Squadron, Webb had heard that sound hundreds of times during training exercises, but something about this particular alarm made his blood run cold. "Sir, we have an unidentified aircraft that deviated from its filed flight plan," Sergeant Rodriguez reported, as Webb rushed into the command center. "The plane took off from Riverside Municipal Airport 30 minutes ago, filed for Las Vegas, but has turned northeast and is now heading toward restricted airspace." Webb studied the radar screen, watching the small blip that represented the unknown aircraft. "Have we attempted radio contact?" "Multiple attempts, sir. No response on any frequency." "The aircraft appears to be a twin-engine civilian plane, possibly a citation based on its radar signature and speed." "Any response from the pilot to our radio calls?" "Negative, sir. Complete radio silence." Webb felt his jaw tighten. In the post-9/11 world, any aircraft that deviated from its flight plan and ignored radio contact was treated as a potential threat. The protocols were clear, even if he didn't like them. "What's the aircraft's current heading?" Webb asked. "Northeast toward Nevada airspace, sir." "If it maintains current course and speed, it will enter restricted military airspace in approximately 40 minutes. Webb looked at the radar screen again, noting the aircraft's altitude and speed. Something felt wrong about the situation. The plane wasn't flying erratically like a hijacked aircraft might, and its speed was consistent with normal civilian flight operations. But protocols were protocols, especially when it came to protecting American airspace. "Scramble 2 F-22s, Webb ordered. "Have them intercept and identify the aircraft. Rules of engagement are to attempt visual contact and radio communication first. If the aircraft continues to ignore communications and enters restricted airspace," he paused, hating what he was about to say. "Pilots are authorized to use any means necessary to prevent a potential threat to national security." Within minutes, Captain Jake Viper Williams and Lieutenant Colonel Amy Phoenix Carter were racing across the tarmac toward their F-22 Raptor fighters. Both pilots were veteran aviators with thousands of flight hours and multiple combat deployments, but intercepting civilian aircraft was always the part of the job they dreaded most. "Phoenix, you copy the mission briefing?" Viper called over the radio as they performed their rapid pre-flight checks. "Roger that, Viper. Unidentified civilian aircraft, possible security threat. Attempt communication and visual identification. Escalate as necessary." "Let's hope it's just some rich guy who forgot to turn his radio on," Viper replied, though his instincts told him this situation was more complicated. The 2 F-22s launched into the desert sky with a thunderous roar, their powerful engines propelling them upward at an incredible rate. The Raptor was the most advanced fighter aircraft in the world, capable of speeds over Mach 2, and equipped with the most sophisticated weapon systems ever developed. Against a small civilian aircraft, it would be like using a sledgehammer to swat a fly. "Control, this is Viper. We're airborne and heading to intercept coordinates. ETA to target approximately 12 minutes. "Copy, Viper. Be advised that the unknown aircraft has maintained course and speed. Still no radio response to our calls." As the two fighters streaked across the Nevada desert, Viper found himself thinking about his own family. He had 2 young children at home, and the thought of having to shoot down a civilian aircraft made his stomach churn. But he also knew that if this plane was being used as a weapon, millions of lives could be at stake. "Viper, I've got visual contact," Phoenix reported as they approached the intercept coordinates. "Civilian aircraft appears to be a Cessna citation, flying straight and level at Angels 20. Viper pulled his F-22 alongside the civilian aircraft and looked through his canopy at the small plane. It looked normal enough from the outside, clean, well-maintained, and flying in a completely stable manner. But appearances could be deceiving. "Control, this is Viper. We have visual contact with the target aircraft. Citation class twin engine, registration number, November 78, Charlie Delta. Aircraft appears to be operating normally, but pilot is not responding to radio calls. Copy, Viper. Attempt to signal the pilot visually. If no response, you are authorized to fire warning shots." Viper maneuvered his fighter closer to the citation, positioning himself where the pilot couldn't possibly miss seeing him. He could make out a figure in the cockpit, but the person appeared to be focused straight ahead and didn't seem to notice the military aircraft flying just 50 feet away. "Phoenix, take position on the other side. Let's see if we can get their attention." The two F-22s positioned themselves on either side of the citation in a classic intercept formation. Through his advanced helmet display, Viper could see more details of the civilian aircraft. The pilot appeared to be a woman with dark hair, and there seemed to be someone else in the cabin area, though he couldn't make out details from this distance. Unknown aircraft, this is United States Air Force Fighter 01. You are flying in restricted airspace. Acknowledge this transmission immediately and follow our instructions." Viper broadcast on the emergency frequency, hoping against hope that the pilot would finally respond. Silence. "Control, target aircraft is still not responding. Recommend we try a different approach before escalating." "Negative, Viper. Intelligence reports indicate possible terrorist threat. If aircraft does not respond in the next 60 seconds, you are authorized to fire warning shots." Viper felt sweat beading on his forehead despite the aircraft's environmental controls. Firing warning shots at a civilian aircraft was a serious escalation that could easily go wrong. If the pilot panicked and lost control, innocent people could die. Meanwhile, inside the citation, Sarah Chen was fighting her own battle with fear and desperation. She had noticed the military aircraft flanking her plane several minutes earlier, and her heart was pounding so hard she thought it might burst. She knew exactly what was happening. The Air Force was preparing to force her down, or worse. Emma was sleeping peacefully in the cabin behind her, blissfully unaware that fighter jets were flying just outside the windows. Sarah looked at her daughter's pale face and thought about turning around, landing the plane, and surrendering. But then she remembered Dr. Martinez's words. Emma didn't have much time left. Sarah's hands trembled as she reached for the radio controls. She had been ignoring all the radio calls because she knew that responding would only lead to orders to land immediately. But now, with military fighters flanking her aircraft, she realized that silence was no longer an option. "Phoenix, I'm going to try the emergency frequency one more time before we fire warning shots," Viper transmitted. "Copy that, Viper. Standing by." Viper keyed his radio again. "Unknown aircraft, this is your final warning. You are in violation of federal airspace restrictions. Acknowledge this transmission immediately or we will be forced to take defensive action." For a moment, there was only static. Then, a voice crackled through the radio that made both fighter pilots freeze. It was the voice of a woman, clearly terrified but trying to stay calm. "Air Force pilots, this is Sarah Chen. Please don't shoot. I have my daughter with me, and she's dying. I'm trying to get her to doctors who can save her life." The radio fell silent as both F-22 pilots processed what they had just heard. This wasn't a terrorist or a foreign agent. This was a mother desperately trying to save her child's life. "Control, did you copy that transmission?" Viper asked, his voice tight with emotion. "We copy, Viper. Maintain intercept formation while we verify the information." Phoenix moved her aircraft closer to the citation, using her helmet's magnification system to get a better look inside the civilian plane. She could now see the woman pilot more clearly, and in the cabin area, she could make out what appeared to be a small child wrapped in blankets. "Viper, I can confirm there's a child aboard the aircraft. Appears to be young, maybe 7 or 8 years old. The pilot does appear to be female, civilian clothing, no apparent weapons visible." Sarah's voice came over the radio again, stronger now, but filled with emotion. "My name is Sarah Chen. Well, my daughter Emma has a rare heart condition, and she needs surgery immediately. The doctors in Switzerland said they can help her, but I couldn't afford the operation here in the United States. I know I've broken the law, but please, I'm begging you, don't force me to land. My daughter will die if I don't get her to those doctors. Viper found himself in an impossible situation. His orders were clear: force the aircraft to land or shoot it down if necessary. But everything in his being rebelled against the idea of taking action against a mother trying to save her child. Control. Requesting clarification of orders. We have confirmed civilian aircraft with mother and sick child aboard. No apparent threat to national security. Negative, Viper. Orders stand. The aircraft must be forced to land immediately. Use minimum necessary force. Sarah, this is Captain Williams of the United States Air Force. Viper transmitted directly to the citation. I understand your situation, and I have children of my own. But you need to understand that you're in restricted airspace, and I have orders to force you to land. Please turn your aircraft around and follow us to the nearest airport. Sarah's voice cracked with emotion as she responded. Captain Williams, I can't do that. If I land now, my daughter will die waiting for insurance companies to decide whether her life is worth saving. I've tried everything else: legal channels, appeals, fundraising. Nothing worked. This is her only chance. Ma'am, I understand your desperation, but what you're doing won't solve anything. Even if you make it to Switzerland, you'll be extradited back to the United States to face federal charges. Your daughter will still need medical care, and you'll be in prison. Then at least she'll be alive, Sarah replied simply. At least I'll have tried everything possible to save her. The radio fell silent again as both fighter pilots struggled with their orders. Neither Viper nor Phoenix had ever encountered a situation like this. They had trained for hostile aircraft, terrorist threats, and foreign military incursions. No one had prepared them for dealing with a desperate mother on a mission of love. Viper, what are we going to do? Phoenix asked on their private channel. I don't know, Phoenix. I really don't know. On the ground at Edwards Air Force Base, Colonel Webb was facing his own impossible decision. The situation had escalated far beyond a simple airspace violation, and he knew that whatever happened next would be scrutinized by Congress, the media, and the American public. Sir, we've confirmed the identity of the pilot, Sergeant Rodriguez reported. Sarah Chen, age 34, civilian flight instructor from Riverside, California. No criminal record, no connections to terrorist organizations. Her daughter Emma Chen was admitted to Children's Hospital Los Angeles 3 days ago with a severe heart condition. Webb stared at the radar screen, watching the small blip that represented a mother's desperate love for her child. He thought about his own daughter and what he might do if she were dying and the system had failed her. Sir, the fighters are requesting further orders. The civilian aircraft is approaching the edge of our intercept zone. Webb knew that in a few minutes he would have to make a decision that could result in the death of an innocent child and her mother. The protocols were clear, but sometimes protocols conflicted with basic human decency. Tell the fighters to maintain formation, but take no aggressive action until I give specific orders. Webb commanded. And get me a direct line to the Pentagon. This situation is way above my pay grade. As the three aircraft continued flying northeast through the morning sky, two of the most advanced fighters in the world flanking a small civilian plane carrying a dying child and her desperate mother, everyone involved knew that they were part of something that would change all their lives forever. The voice that had stopped two F-22 Raptors in their tracks was about to test the very foundations of duty, compassion, and what it truly means to protect and serve. In the Pentagon's National Military Command Center, General Patricia Hayes was having the worst morning of her 30-year military career. As the Deputy Chief of Staff for Operations, she had dealt with international crises, terrorist threats, and natural disasters. But nothing had prepared her for the phone call she received from Edwards Air Force Base at 0847 hours. General, this is Colonel Webb at Edwards. We have a situation that requires immediate attention at the highest levels. Hayes listened as Webb briefed her on the unfolding drama in the skies over Nevada, a civilian aircraft stolen by a desperate mother, two F-22s in intercept formation, and a dying child caught in the middle of an international incident that was growing more complicated by the minute. Colonel, what's the current status of the civilian aircraft? Hayes asked, pulling up real-time satellite imagery on her secure workstation. Ma'am, the aircraft is maintaining course and speed toward the northeast. Based on our analysis, they appear to be heading for international airspace. Our pilots have established communication with the subject, confirmed the presence of a sick child aboard, but she refuses to comply with orders to land. Hayes studied the satellite feed showing three aircraft flying in formation across the desert landscape. The tactical situation was clear enough, but the human element made everything infinitely more complex. Has State Department been notified? We've initiated contact, ma'am. They're evaluating potential international implications if the aircraft crosses into Canadian airspace. And the media? No media contact yet, but civilian aviation tracking websites show the aircraft as an anomaly. It's only a matter of time before someone starts asking questions. Hayes knew that once the media got hold of this story, it would explode into a national controversy. The image of American fighter jets threatening a mother trying to save her sick child would dominate headlines for weeks and potentially damage military-civilian relations for years. Colonel, I'm taking direct operational control of this situation. Your pilots are to maintain visual contact but take no aggressive action without my express authorization. Is that understood? Understood, ma'am. Should we continue attempting to persuade the pilot to land voluntarily? Negative. I want to try a different approach. Hayes immediately activated the secure communication system that would allow her to speak directly with the intercepted aircraft. Within minutes, she was connected to Sarah Chen's radio frequency. Miss Chen, this is General Patricia Hayes of the United States Air Force. I understand. You have your daughter aboard and that she's seriously ill. Sarah's voice came through clearly, though Hayes could hear the strain and fear in every word. General Hayes, please don't make me land. My daughter Emma has hours, maybe days left to live. The doctors in Switzerland can save her, but I have to get her there. Miss Chen, I'm a mother too. I have 2 children of my own, and I can only imagine what you're going through. But you have to understand that what you're doing puts your daughter in even greater danger. These fighters flanking your aircraft are armed, and there are protocols in place that could force me to take action I don't want to take. General, with all due respect, my daughter is already dying. The greatest danger to her life isn't your fighters, it's the insurance companies and hospital administrators who decided her life isn't worth their money. Hayes felt a knot form in her stomach. As a military officer, she was sworn to uphold the law and protect American airspace. But as a mother, she understood exactly what was driving Sarah Chen's desperate actions. Miss Chen, even if you make it to Switzerland, you'll be extradited back to the United States. You'll face federal charges that could put you in prison for decades. How will that help your daughter? At least she'll be alive to visit me in prison, Sarah replied. At least I'll know I tried everything possible to save her. The raw pain in Sarah's voice cut through Hayes like a knife. She looked around the command center at the dozens of military personnel monitoring the situation, all of them waiting for her decision. Some looked sympathetic, others appeared focused solely on the tactical implications. But Hayes knew that whatever choice she made would define her legacy and potentially set precedent for how the military handled similar situations in the future. Meanwhile, in the cockpit of Viper's F-22, Captain Jake Williams was struggling with his own moral crisis. He had been in combat situations where split-second decisions meant the difference between life and death for his fellow service members. But this situation was unlike anything he had ever faced. "Phoenix, you still with me?" He transmitted to his wingman. "I'm here, Viper. This is seriously messed up." "Tell me about it. I keep looking at that little girl in there and thinking about my own kids. What do you think Command is going to order us to do?" Viper was quiet for a moment, watching the Citation flying steadily ahead of them. Through his helmet's advanced optics, he could see Sarah Chen in the cockpit, occasionally turning to check on her daughter in the cabin behind her. "I don't know, Phoenix. But I'll tell you this. If they order us to shoot down that plane, I'm going to have a real hard time following that order."
Viper, you know we can't disobey direct orders.
"I know what our oaths say about following orders, Phoenix. But I also know what my conscience says about killing innocent people, especially children." The conversation was interrupted by General Hayes' voice on their command frequency. "Interceptor flight, this is Pentagon Command. What's your current assessment of the threat level posed by the civilian aircraft?" Viper responded immediately. "Ma'am, based on our visual observation, we assess 0 threat to national security. The aircraft is flying normally, the pilot is cooperative in communication, and we've confirmed the presence of a sick child aboard. In my professional opinion, this is a civilian emergency, not a military threat." "Thank you, Captain. Continue to monitor and escort, but take no aggressive action until further notice." As the 3 aircraft continued northeast across Nevada, the situation was becoming an international incident. Canadian Air Traffic Control had been notified of the approaching aircraft and was coordinating with American authorities. Swiss officials had been contacted about the potential arrival of an American civilian aircraft carrying a sick child. Back in Los Angeles, Dr. Martinez was pacing the halls of Children's Hospital trying to understand what had happened to his patient. Sarah Chen had signed Emma out of the hospital the previous day, claiming she was taking her daughter home for a few days before the scheduled surgery. But when he tried to call Sarah that morning to check on Emma's condition, her phone went straight to voicemail. It wasn't until a nurse mentioned seeing a news report about a stolen aircraft with sick child aboard that Dr. Martinez began to piece together what Sarah had done. "Get me the FBI," he told his assistant. "I think I know what happened to Emma Chen." Within the hour, Dr. Martinez was speaking with federal agents who were trying to understand the medical aspects of the case. He explained Emma's condition, the urgency of her need for surgery, and the insurance complications that had delayed her treatment. "Doctor, in your professional opinion, how long does this child have to live without surgical intervention?" Agent Susan Torres asked. Based on her latest test results, she could go into complete cardiac failure at any time. "We're talking days, possibly hours." Her mother wasn't exaggerating when she said, "The child is dying." "Is it possible that foreign medical facilities could provide better treatment than what's available in the United States?" Dr. Martinez paused, considering his answer carefully. "The surgical procedure Emma needs is performed at several facilities worldwide. The Swiss hospital Ms. Chen mentioned has an excellent reputation and success rate. But the same procedure could be performed here in Los Angeles if the insurance issues could be resolved." "And what would it take to resolve those issues?" "A miracle." "Dr. Raff," Martinez said bitterly, "the insurance company has been stalling for months. They know that if they delay long enough, they might not have to pay anything at all." As this conversation was taking place in Los Angeles, Sarah Chen was facing the most difficult decision of her life. The Citation had enough fuel to make it to the Canadian border, but she was running low on options. Her daughter's condition was deteriorating, and Emma was starting to show signs of distress that couldn't be ignored much longer. "Mummy, I don't feel good," Emma whispered weakly from her seat in the cabin. Sarah looked back at her daughter and felt her heart breaking. Emma's lips were more blue than they had been that morning, and her breathing was becoming increasingly labored. The portable oxygen tank was helping, but it wasn't enough to compensate for her failing heart. "I know, sweetheart. We're going to see the doctors very soon." "The flying men outside are very big," Emma said, having noticed the F-22s through the window. "Are they here to help us?" Sarah felt tears welling up in her eyes. How could she explain to an 8-year-old that the flying men were actually prepared to shoot them down if ordered to do so? "Yes, baby. They're here to make sure we get to the doctors safely." It was a lie, but it was the only answer Sarah could give that wouldn't terrify her daughter even more than she already was. General Hayes' voice crackled through the radio again. "Ms. Chen, I've been in contact with medical authorities in Los Angeles. Dr. Presev, Dr. Tross. Martinez has confirmed your daughter's condition and the urgency of her need for treatment. I want to propose an alternative solution." Sarah felt a glimmer of hope. "I'm listening, General. If you agree to land at Nellis Air Force Base, I will personally guarantee that your daughter receives immediate medical transport to the best cardiac facility in the country. The military will cover all medical expenses and you will not be charged with any crimes related to this flight. General, that's a very generous offer, but what guarantee do I have that the insurance companies won't just resume their delaying tactics once Emma is back in the civilian medical system? Ms. Chen, you have my word as an officer and a mother that your daughter will receive the medical care she needs regardless of insurance complications. The United States Air Force has medical facilities and resources that can handle your daughter's case immediately." Sarah was torn. The offer sounded too good to be true, but she was running out of time and options. Emma was getting worse by the minute, and even if they made it to Switzerland, the stress of the long flight might kill her daughter before they reached medical help. "General, I need a few minutes to think about this." "Of course, Ms. Chen, but please understand that time is a factor for everyone involved. The longer the situation continues, the fewer options we all have." As Sarah weighed her decision, she looked back at Emma, who was now struggling to keep her eyes open. The little girl who had been so excited about flying in the palace in the sky was now fighting just to breathe. In that moment, Sarah realized that her desperate gamble had been about more than just getting Emma to Switzerland. It had been about forcing the system to pay attention to her daughter's life, to acknowledge that Emma Chen was a human being worth saving, rather than just another insurance liability to be minimized. And perhaps, Sarah thought as she looked at the fighter jets flanking her aircraft, her desperate flight had accomplished exactly that. Sarah Chen's hands trembled on the controls as she made the most important decision of her life. Through the cockpit window, she could see Captain Williams in his F-22 Raptor, flying steadily beside her. Somehow, knowing that he was a father too, made her feel less alone in the vast Nevada sky. "General Hayes, this is Sarah Chen," she transmitted, her voice barely steady. "I'm going to accept your offer, but I need to know exactly what will happen to my daughter when we land. Miss Chen, I have a medical team standing by at Nellis. Dr. Colonel Jennifer Park is one of the military's top cardiac surgeons, and she's reviewed your daughter's medical records. She's prepared to evaluate Emma immediately and, if necessary, perform emergency surgery at our medical facility." Sarah felt a mixture of relief and terror wash over her. After months of fighting insurance companies and bureaucrats, someone was finally offering to help her daughter without demanding payment up front. What about the legal consequences for me? Miss Westow. Chen, I won't lie to you. There will be legal issues to resolve. You've technically stolen an aircraft and violated numerous federal aviation regulations. But I've spoken with the Justice Department, and given the circumstances, they're prepared to work with us on a solution that focuses on getting your daughter the help she needs. Behind Sarah, Emma stirred in her seat, her breathing becoming more labored. The little girl's face was pale, and her lips had taken on an alarming blue tint that hadn't been there an hour earlier. "Mummy, I'm cold," Emma whispered weakly. Sarah turned around to check on her daughter, and what she saw made her blood run cold. Emma's condition was deteriorating rapidly, and Sarah realized that even the short flight to Nellis Air Force Base might be too much for her failing heart. "General Hayes, my daughter is getting worse. I don't think she can wait much longer." "Understood." "Ms. Chen, I'm vectoring you directly to Nellis with priority emergency clearance. Captain Williams will escort you in, and we'll have medical personnel standing by on the runway." Captain Williams heard the exchange and moved his F-22 closer to the citation. Through his helmet's advanced optics, he could see the small figure of Emma in the aircraft's cabin, and his heart clenched as he recognized the signs of a child in medical distress. "Sarah, this is Captain Williams. I've got kids of my own, and I want you to know that we're going to take good care of your daughter. You've been incredibly brave, and you're almost home." "Thank you, Captain," Sarah replied, tears streaming down her face. "I was so scared you were going to shoot us down." "Ma'am, that was never going to happen. Not with a child aboard, not under these circumstances." As the three aircraft began their descent toward Nellis Air Force Base, the story was already becoming national news. Amateur aviation enthusiasts who tracked military flights had noticed the unusual formation of two 522s escorting a civilian aircraft, and social media was buzzing with speculation about what was happening in the Nevada skies. At Nellis Air Force Base, Dr. Colonel Jennifer Park was scrubbing in for what might be the most important surgery of her career. She had reviewed Emma Chen's medical records and spoken with Dr. Martinez in Los Angeles. The little girl's condition was critical, and every minute counted. "The aircraft should be on the ground in 15 minutes, the base commander informed her. "Are you ready?" "As ready as I can be," Dr. Park replied. "I've performed this procedure dozens of times, but never under these circumstances. The child's heart is severely compromised, and the stress of the flight may have made things worse." "What are her chances?" Dr. Park paused, considering her honest assessment. "Under normal circumstances, I'd say 70% chance of full recovery. But given her current condition and the stress she's been under, it's more like 50-50. Meanwhile, in the Pentagon, General Hayes was dealing with the media storm that was beginning to brew around the incident. News helicopters were already en route to Nellis, and reporters were demanding answers about why the Air Force had allowed a stolen aircraft to land at a military installation. "General, CNN is reporting that we've captured a terrorist who was using a child as a human shield," her aide informed her. "They're asking for an official statement." Hayes felt anger rising in her chest. The last thing this situation needed was sensationalized media coverage that portrayed Sarah Chen as a terrorist. "Get me a direct line to CNN's aviation correspondent. I want to set the record straight before this story gets completely out of control." As the citation approached Nellis Air Force Base, Sarah could see emergency vehicles and medical personnel positioned along the runway. The sight of so many people mobilized to help her daughter filled her with gratitude and hope. "Emma, sweetheart, can you hear me?" Sarah called back to her daughter. "Yes, Mommy," Emma replied weakly. "Are we there yet?" "Almost, baby. There are doctors waiting to help you feel better." "Will they really fix my heart?" Sarah felt her throat tighten with emotion. "They're going to try their very best, sweetheart. The very best." Captain Williams guided the citation through its final approach, providing radio calls to help Sarah navigate the landing at the unfamiliar military airfield. His own experience as a father made him acutely aware of what Sarah was going through, and he found himself silently praying for the little girl's recovery. "Sarah, you're doing great. Just follow my lead and keep the aircraft steady. We're almost on the ground. The Citation touched down on Nellis Air Force Base's runway at 12:47 hours, ending one of the most unusual aircraft intercepts in military history. As the plane rolled to a stop, medical personnel rushed toward the aircraft while security teams maintained a respectful distance. Park was the first aboard the Citation, and what she found confirmed her worst fears. Emma Chen was in severe cardiac distress, her little body fighting a battle it was rapidly losing. "We need to get her to the medical facility immediately," Dr. Park told Sarah as she began her initial assessment. "Her heart is in critical failure, and we don't have much time." Sarah watched as the medical team carefully transferred Emma to a gurney equipped with portable life support equipment. Her daughter looked so small and fragile surrounded by all the medical equipment, but for the first time in months, Sarah felt like Emma was in the hands of people who could actually help her. "Ma'am, I'm going to need you to come with us," Dr. Park told Sarah. "I'll need your permission for emergency surgery, and Emma will be calmer if you're nearby." As they rushed toward the medical facility, Sarah found herself surrounded by Air Force personnel who were treating her with unexpected kindness and respect. She had expected to be arrested immediately upon landing, but instead she was being escorted as a concerned parent rather than a criminal. General Hayes had arrived at Nellis just as the Citation was landing, and she was waiting at the medical facility when the team arrived with Emma. "Miss Chen, I'm General Hayes. We spoke on the radio." Sarah looked up from her daughter's gurney to see a woman in Air Force dress uniform whose eyes reflected the same parental concern that Sarah had been living with for months. "General, thank you for letting us land. Thank you for helping my daughter." "Ms. Chen, you're a mother who was fighting for her child's life. I couldn't have lived with myself if we had forced you to crash or shot you down." "Doctor," Park interrupted the conversation. "General, Ms. Chen, I need to get Emma into surgery immediately. Her heart is failing and we can't wait any longer." Sarah bent down and kissed Emma's forehead. "I love you, sweetheart. The doctors are going to take good care of you." "I love you too, Mommy," Emma whispered. "Thank you for taking me flying." As the medical team wheeled Emma into the operating room, Sarah collapsed into a chair in the waiting area, emotionally and physically exhausted. For the first time in months, her daughter was receiving the medical attention she needed, but now all Sarah could do was wait and pray. General Hayes sat down beside her. "Ms. Chen, there are some things we need to discuss while the doctors work on Emma. Am I under arrest?" "Not exactly. The situation is complicated, and there are a lot of people involved in deciding how to handle the legal aspects of what happened today. But I want you to know that your primary concern should be your daughter's recovery. Everything else can be sorted out later." "General, I know I broke the law, I stole that plane, and I violated restricted airspace. I'm prepared to face the consequences." "Ms. Chen, you're not the only one who broke protocol today. I allowed an unidentified aircraft to land at a classified military installation based on nothing more than a mother's plea for help. Captain Williams and Lieutenant Colonel Carter disobeyed standard intercept procedures by not forcing you down immediately. We all made decisions based on human compassion rather than strict adherence to regulations." Sarah looked at the general with surprise. "Why would you risk your careers for someone you've never met?" "Because sometimes doing the right thing is more important than following rules. And because every parent should be willing to do whatever it takes to save their child's life." As they sat in the waiting room, Sarah began to understand that her desperate flight had accomplished something she never expected. She had forced the system to confront the human cost of bureaucratic indifference. Emma's story had touched everyone involved, from fighter pilots to generals to hospital administrators, and had reminded them all of what really mattered. Outside the medical facility, news crews were setting up equipment as word spread about the dramatic conclusion to the mid-air crisis. But inside the operating room, Dr. Park was focused on the only thing that truly mattered: saving the life of a little girl whose mother had been brave enough to steal a plane and face down the United States Air Force for her sake. The surgery would take several hours, and Sarah knew that the most difficult part of this entire ordeal was still ahead of her. But for the first time since Emma's diagnosis, she felt genuine hope that her daughter might actually survive. 6 hours after Emma Chen was wheeled into the operating room at Nellis Air Force Base, Dr. Colonel Jennifer Park emerged with the kind of exhausted expression that could mean either triumph or tragedy. Sarah Chen looked up from the waiting room chair where she had been sitting motionless, her heart pounding as she searched the surgeon's face for any sign of hope. "Miss said, Chen," Dr. Park said softly, pulling up a chair to sit directly across from Sarah. "The surgery was successful. Emma's heart is functioning normally, and she's going to be fine." Sarah felt her legs give way as relief flooded through her entire body. She had held herself together through months of medical uncertainty, through the desperate decision to steal an aircraft, through the terrifying encounter with fighter jets, and through 6 hours of waiting while her daughter's life hung in the balance. But hearing those simple words, "she's going to be fine," finally broke through all her defenses. She sobbed uncontrollably for several minutes while Dr. Park sat quietly beside her, understanding that sometimes tears are the only adequate response to the end of a parent's worst nightmare. "Can I see her?" Sarah finally managed to ask. "She's in recovery right now, but she's stable and breathing on her own." The repair to her heart valve was more complex than we initially anticipated, but we were able to correct all the structural problems. With proper follow-up care, she should be able to live a completely normal life. As Dr. Park led Sarah toward the recovery room, she explained the details of the surgery. Emma's heart defect had been more severe than the original diagnosis had suggested, which explained why her condition had deteriorated so rapidly in recent days. Without immediate surgical intervention, she probably would not have survived another week. "Miss Chen, I want you to understand something." "Doctor," Park said as they walked through the hospital corridors, "your decision to take that plane may have saved your daughter's life. If you had waited for the insurance approval process to work its way through the system, Emma would likely have gone into complete cardiac failure." Sarah stopped walking and stared at the doctor. "Are you saying I did the right thing?" "I'm saying that as a mother and as a physician, I understand exactly why you did what you did. The medical system failed your daughter, and you refused to let her become another statistic." In the recovery room, Emma looked incredibly small, surrounded by monitoring equipment and IV lines, but her color was already better than it had been in weeks. Her lips were pink instead of blue, and her breathing was strong and steady. "She won't wake up for a few hours," Dr. Park explained. "The anesthesia takes time to wear off, and her body needs rest to begin the healing process." Sarah pulled a chair close to Emma's bed and took her daughter's small hand in hers. For the first time since this whole ordeal began, she allowed herself to believe that Emma was going to survive. "Mummy?" Emma's weak voice surprised everyone in the room. She wasn't supposed to be conscious yet. "I'm here, sweetheart," Sarah said, leaning close to her daughter's face. "Did the flying doctors fix my heart?" Sarah laughed through her tears. "Yes, baby, Doctor Park fixed your heart, and you're going to be all better now." "Good," Emma whispered before drifting back to sleep. "I want to go flying again sometime." While Emma recovered, the aftermath of Sarah's desperate flight was creating ripple effects throughout the government and military establishment. The story had become international news, with headlines around the world focusing on the mother who forced the U.S. Air Force to help save her dying daughter. General Hayes found herself testifying before a congressional committee about the military's response to the incident. Some lawmakers criticized her decision to allow the aircraft to land, arguing that it set a dangerous precedent for responding to airspace violations. Others praised her compassion and common sense in handling an unprecedented situation. General Hayes, Congressman Robert Martinez asked during the hearing, "What would you say to critics who argue that your actions undermine national security protocols?" "Congressman, I would say that national security includes protecting the lives of American children. Emma Chen is an American citizen, and she was dying because bureaucratic processes were more important than her life. When faced with a choice between rigid adherence to protocol and saving a child's life, I chose to save the child. But what if this incident encourages others to violate restricted airspace, believing they can claim a medical emergency? Sir, I don't believe any parent would subject their child to the risks that Sarah Chen took unless they were truly desperate. This wasn't a calculated attempt to exploit the system. It was a mother's last resort to save her daughter's life." Captain Jake Williams also found himself under scrutiny for his role in the incident. Military investigators questioned his decision not to fire warning shots when ordered, and his superiors reviewed whether his actions constituted insubordination. Captain Williams, the investigating officer, asked, "When you received orders to fire warning shots, why didn't you comply immediately?" "Sir, I assessed the situation and determined that warning shots could have caused the pilot to lose control of the aircraft, potentially resulting in the death of a child. My primary mission as a military officer is to protect American lives, and I couldn't justify taking action that might harm an innocent child. But you were directly ordered to fire warning shots." "Yes, sir, and I chose to delay that action until I could better assess the threat level. In my judgment, there was no threat to national security, only a medical emergency involving a civilian aircraft." The investigation ultimately concluded that Williams had acted within his discretion as an aircraft commander, and no disciplinary action was taken. In fact, he was quietly commended for his judgment and restraint in handling an impossible situation. Meanwhile, Sarah Chen found herself facing a very different kind of scrutiny. Federal prosecutors had to decide whether to press charges against a woman who had stolen an aircraft, but done so to save her child's life. The case attracted attention from legal experts, child advocacy groups, and civil rights organizations. The Chen case presents a unique challenge for the justice system, explained Professor Linda Rodriguez, a legal expert at Georgetown University who was following the case. Technically, Ms. Chen committed multiple federal crimes, but prosecuting a mother for trying to save her dying child would be a public relations nightmare and could set a troubling precedent for how we treat desperate parents. After weeks of deliberation, federal prosecutors announced that they would not pursue criminal charges against Sarah Chen. Instead, she would be required to perform community service by speaking to parent advocacy groups about healthcare access issues and would reimburse the government for the costs associated with the military response to her flight. James Morrison, the owner of the stolen Citation, initially threatened to pursue civil charges against Sarah, but after the full story became public and he faced intense criticism for his callous attitude toward a mother's desperate situation, he quietly dropped all claims and even donated money to a fund established to help other families facing similar medical crises. The insurance company that had denied Emma's surgery faced the harshest consequences of all. Congressional hearings revealed a pattern of deliberately delaying approval for expensive procedures in hopes that patients would die or find alternative funding sources. The company faced massive fines and was forced to reform its approval processes for pediatric cardiac surgeries. 3 months after the surgery, Emma Chen was a completely different child. Her color was healthy, her energy was boundless, and she showed no signs of the heart problems that had nearly killed her. During a follow-up appointment with Dr. Generica Rebecca Park, she bounced into the examination room with an enthusiasm that brought tears to her mother's eyes. "Doctor Park, guess what?" Emma announced excitedly. "Mummy said we can get flying lessons together when I'm older. She's going to teach me how to be a pilot just like her." "Doctor," Park smiled as she listened to Emma's strong, steady heartbeat through her stethoscope. "That sounds wonderful, Emma. Just promise me you'll file proper flight plans and get permission before you take off." Emma giggled. "Mummy already promised we would always follow the rules from now on."
Sarah laughed, but her expression grew serious as she looked at Dr.
Park. "Doctor, I want you to know how grateful I am for everything you did. Not just the surgery, but the way you treated us with such compassion and respect. Ms. Chen, you don't need to thank me. I just did my job. No, you did much more than that. You saw a sick child and a desperate mother, and you chose to help instead of judging. That's not something every doctor would have done." As they left the medical facility that day, Sarah reflected on how dramatically their lives had changed. Emma was healthy and happy, bouncing along beside her with the kind of energy that only children possess. But more than that, their story had sparked a national conversation about healthcare access, parental rights, and the human cost of bureaucratic indifference. Sarah had returned to work as a flight instructor, though she was now something of a celebrity in the aviation community. Her students often asked about the day you stole a plane to save your daughter, and Sarah used those opportunities to talk about the importance of advocating for the people you love. General Hayes had also been profoundly affected by the incident. She established a new protocol for handling civilian aircraft emergencies, one that prioritized human factors alongside security concerns. She also became an advocate for healthcare reform, using her position to speak about how systemic failures in medical care could create desperate situations that threaten national security. Captain Williams stayed in touch with Sarah and Emma, visiting them whenever his duties brought him to California. Emma always insisted on showing him her latest drawings of airplanes and telling him about her dreams of becoming a pilot someday. "You know, Emma," Williams told her during one visit, "your mum is one of the bravest pilots I've ever met. She faced down 2 fighter jets to save your life." "I know," Emma replied matter-of-factly. "Mommies do whatever it takes to protect their babies. That's what love means." As Sarah listened to her daughter's simple wisdom, she realized that Emma had learned something from their experience that many adults never understand. Love isn't just a feeling. It's a commitment to action, even when that action requires incredible courage and sacrifice. The story of the voice that stopped 252 Raptors in mid-flight became more than just a news sensation. It became a reminder that behind every desperate act is a human story worth understanding, and that sometimes the greatest threats to our security come not from foreign enemies but from our own failure to take care of each other. Emma Chen grew up healthy and strong, eventually becoming a pediatric cardiologist herself. Inspired by Dr. Park and determined to make sure no other child would have to wait for bureaucratic approval to receive life-saving medical care. And whenever she told the story of how her mother had stolen a plane to save her life, she always ended with the same words. Sometimes love means breaking the rules. And sometimes breaking the rules is the most patriotic thing you can do. The Chen family's story proved that the most powerful force in the world isn't military might or government authority, it's the love of a parent who refuses to accept that their child's life is anything less than precious beyond measure. And on one clear October morning over the Nevada desert, that love was strong enough to stop two of the most advanced fighter jets in the world with nothing more than a voice on the radio and a mother's unbreakable determination to save her daughter's life.